Okay, so at this point where we've seen some looping, some if statements, I do want to start exposing you to playing around with graphics a little bit and with Python. And so we're not gonna do this from scratch because it would take a lot of work. Instead, we're gonna be using this module called Pygame. So Pygame is a module or a class. So we use those two words interchangeably, but we have installed Pygame at the very beginning when I told you to install Python. Excuse me. When I went over how to install Python, I also mentioned in that video how to install Pygame. But if you replicate this code and it's not working for you, then you do need to make sure you install Pygame. And so what I need you to do is just pause this video and look at the installation video that I have posted on how to install Pygame on a Windows. And also I've listed the command to install Pygame on a Mac. So look through those two, make sure that works for you. Although I do believe at the beginning of the school year, the majority of you were able to do this step. So we're going to import Pygame. By the way, Pygame has a list of all kinds of different commands that we're going to be using. And there's no way that I expect you to memorize or know all of those commands. As a matter of fact, I have not memorized all of those commands. One of them, for example, is init, which stands for like initialize things, initialize Pygame, and then quit, which basically quits Pygame. So those are two commands. Now, if you code this and you run it, nothing should happen besides having here the version of Pygame that is listed as 1.9.6 on the Python shell, and this message that says hello from the Pygame community. If you coded this and instead you get an error talking about how it cannot find the module Pygame, then you need to go and reinstall and make sure you install this correctly. But if it's working fine, this is what you should see. Now, let me talk a little bit about the documentation, because there is the documentation with Pygame that we can reference so that in case we have maybe we're not clear on how to do something with Pygame, I've posted that documentation on Canvas. So I've made this new module called Pygame, which is where I'm going to be posting the majority of these assignments that have to do with Pygame. This is the documentation. You can click on it, or if that does not working for you because it was a little laggy for me, you can always go to Google and just look this PDF file online. And if you just look Pygame documentation PDF, like I have here, this PDF, notice it says PDF right there. This is what I've posted on Canvas. So it's the exact same thing. Now let me go over the basic commands here to first get a screen showing up. Well, the screen is where we're actually going to be drawing stuff and maybe building games. So I'm going to look for, I can do Control F and I can look for things. There's a set mode command. Notice how it actually shows up there. Let me just go down here. Here it is. Now, this is the command that we're going to use to make a window, to have a window show up. This is basically a description of how it works. And usually you're given an example, for example. Now on the example kind of helps you. It doesn't always give you an example, but notice here they made a variable called screen width and they made it 700. They made a variable called screen height. They made it 400. And then they used the display command, the set mode command, and they put the width and the height, they separated them by a comma and they put them inside these square brackets, and that all goes inside the set mode. So let's replicate that. Let's come in here after init. We're going to do pygame display dot set underscore mode. Now in parentheses, I need to put a set of square brackets. And the first value, I'm not going to make a variable just yet. I can do that later. The first value I want to do is the width of my window. So I'll put 700, comma, 400. Okay. Now, I'm not going to quite run this because I know how this works. Well, let me just run it. Notice the window showed up, but it was gone. And that's because when you do line 7, when you execute that command, almost immediately you execute line 9, which quits. It quits Pygame, so your window goes away. So let's put a delay in here so we can see our window for a little bit longer. Again, I go to the documentation, and I'm going to look up delay. Now, I know what I'm looking for, so it's time.delay. And here it is, pygame.time.delay. Notice that they don't give us an example here, but if you read it, it kind of gives you an idea of how this works. What you do notice, though, what we should notice is that we have delay here, which matches that, and then there's milliseconds inside parentheses. And this kind of tells you that we need to put a number inside of the parentheses. Just like right here when we have wait, which matches that, we call these functions or methods. We put the number of milliseconds that we want to wait. There is a difference between wait and delay, and I think the main difference is right here. It is a little slightly less accurate than pygame.time.delay. So we'll use this one instead, pygame.time.delay. So after I make my window, I want to delay a few seconds. So pygame.time.delay, and the amount here is in milliseconds. So if I put 1,000 milliseconds, that converts to 1 second. So time in milliseconds. And I'm going to increase this to 5 because 1 second is too quick. And so notice how my window now is there, and I have 5 seconds before it goes away. Perfect. Okay, so we have 4 commands here. Now let's just make a few changes here. Let's make the 700 and 400. Let's store those values in variables. So we can make a variable called W for width, short for width, and I can make that 700. And H, short for height, and I can make that 400. And if you like, you can put a comment here that this is the width of the window, and this is the height of the window. And then I'm going to go ahead and replace 700 with W and 400 with height. Now, it is convenient to do this because we might actually end up using the width and the height of the window later down the road. And instead of putting 700 everywhere where we need that, we can just use the variable width. I'm going to put a set of spaces there just to make this a little more easy to see. Now we can also fill the screen color. We can set the background color, and let me just look here at a previous code, just because I've done this in the past. And again, I don't memorize all these values. Okay. Now, if I want what we want a handle on the screen, meaning we want to be able to do things with my screen, like change the background color on the screen, then it's always convenient to say that we're going to make a variable where we're going to kind of when we make the screen, the window, we want to store it somewhere. And so right in front of line 9, where I have the display.set mode, I'm going to say that that win, which is short for window, equals pygame.display.set mode. And this gives me stores the window in the variable win. Now, why is that convenient? Well, because if we store the window in variable win, afterwards we can change the color of the window by saying win dot. And if we look at the documentation, I'm going to look up And I'm a little familiar with these commands, so that's why I know how to look for them a little bit. So let's do fill. How many hits do I get? 70. That's too many. Fill color. Nope. Set color. Okay, so it is fill. If you go to the very beginning of the document, you have quite a few commands here. Notice how it kind of puts a little bit of a table of contents here. It gives you just a little bit of a table of contents. I'm looking for fill. I wonder if it's display.fill. Okay, so it's just fill. There it is, fill. All bits to 1. Okay. So it is a command that I can add to the window. So I have window, and I'm going to fill the window. And in parentheses, I need to put it the color I want to give it. Now let me talk a little bit about colors in Python, or actually specifically in Pygame. When we make a color scheme, we use what we call RGB, which stands for red, green, and blue. So I'm going to make a variable called screen color, and I'm going to set it equal to the amount of red, green, and blue that I want. And none of these values can't exceed 255. None of them can exceed a value of 255. Now, again, if we open up a web browser and we look up HTML color codes, just a convenient website here, HTML color codes, you can start looking for colors that you might want. So maybe a green or a blue. So let's say I want my background to be this light blue. Notice how right here it gives me up here and right here on the side, it gives me the amount of red I need, 51, the amount of green I need, 181, and the amount of blue, 255. So red, green, blue. None of these values will ever be more than 255. If you try that, you'll get an error. So 51, 181, and 255. And that's the amount of red, green, and blue. And I can fill my screen using that screen color, the variable. So notice how I put that variable in here inside of the fill command. Now, if I run this, I won't see the screen show up, because every time that you make a change to your screen or you draw something on your screen, you need to update your screen. And again, another command here within this documentation is display.update. Notice how it says right here. And it says updates portions of the screen for software displays. This function is only optimized for blah, blah, blah. You can pass the function a single rectangle. Okay, now there's a lot that's going on here, but we can just try it out. After we set the screen color to that little baby blue there, I'm gonna do the pygame.display.update, and I'm gonna test this. And it works. Notice how at first it was black, okay? So when I first make my display on line 9, it's black. And then I fill the window. Notice that win is the variable here. I fill it with the screen color that I chose, the color scheme I chose from the HTML color codes website. And then I update my display on line 15, which means that it changes the color. And then I delay for 5 seconds, and then I quit. Okay, so now this is starting to look a little better. Now you can choose whatever color scheme you want. If you have all zeros, then that corresponds to a black background. If you have the maximum number that you can have on any of these, which would be 255 red, 255 green, and 255 blue, then that corresponds to, what's the opposite of black? White. So you get a white background. And that's the biggest number you can use, okay, for any of these values, 255, 255, and 255. You pick your color for now. It's okay. So I had 51, 181, and 255, which corresponds to a baby blue. Notice here we have a window here that is baby blue. And so again, let me just kind of walk you through the commands here. I'm going to erase this comment because I feel like it's a little too much. Actually, let me put it here right above it so that it doesn't go on to the next line. So we make the variable the W, which is the width of the window. Then we make the variable H, which is the height. We initialize Pygame using this pygame.init. So that gets some things going in the background that we can then use later down the road. Then we make our window on line 10 using this display.set mode. And we use the width and the height that we have declared up here. By the way, if we change those values, then our window is going to get bigger and smaller. We store the window itself in a variable win, so that later on, if we need to, we can change some properties of the window. And we actually do that. On line 13, we declare the color of the screen by setting it equal to the amount of red, green, and blue. Notice that I had to have them around parentheses. I need them to be around parentheses. So this corresponds to a baby blue that we looked up on htmlcolorcodes.com. Right here, htmlcolorcodes.com. You can pick any color you want. Then we say, I'm going to take my window, which is that variable win, and I'm going to fill it with the screen color that I chose. But that itself, although it happens, we don't see it unless we update our display. So on line 16, let's update the window so that we can see that color. Finally, we delay for 5 seconds or 5,000 milliseconds before we quit. Now, this is how you get a background, okay? This is how we get started here with our background. What I want to do, and I'm afraid I might do this in just a separate video so that it's not all too much in this one video. What I want to do next is I want to just draw a circle, and I want to draw that circle and have it move, kind of like to simulate like a ball rolling. And I want to do that because I want to show you that you can do that with what you know already, which is if statements and while loops. So I'm going to go ahead and include that in the following video. Make sure that you are successful here with replicating this code. So work on it, understand what each part of this means, and then watch the next video.